Good morning, welcome to Headline Focus here live on Core Politics with me, Rob Double. It is Friday the 23rd of February 2018. Let's have a look at what's making the political news today. So, you might have remembered yesterday we covered what's going to happen in Chequers when the Prime Minister and all her Brexit war cabinet meet to thrash out the government policy. Well, that's the main story in today's papers as well. The key thing is over the 8-hour meeting at Chequers, the Prime Minister's private residence in Buckinghamshire, the 11-strong team of ministers agreed for the UK to start trade negotiations on the same position, and that is managed divergence. Now, what does that really mean? That basically means Britain has control, or the emphasis is that Britain needs to have control over its rules and its regulations, but it chooses in certain sectors, the sectors where we have a big trading relationship with the EU, we will then keep and maintain equivalent high standards and regulations with the EU, so to ensure that there aren't any trade barriers in those sectors, and so business can continue relatively as normal post-Brexit. That's the theory, that's the idea. It's called a three baskets approach in terms of the divergence, going all the way from we're going completely different to the EU in terms of rules and regulations in one basket, and over on the other side, we are basically going to completely copy the EU rules and regulations in that sector because it benefits everyone to keep those regulations in place. And then in the middle is we'll pick some bits of some regulation in some industries and we'll go our own way in the other, but we'll have an agreement in place with the EU whereby everyone accepts that we're all achieving the same goal, whether that economic or regulatory or protections and stuff like that, and so we are able to keep trade barriers at a minimum. That's roughly what it means. Now, who's it a win for in terms of the Cabinet, of the Leavers and the Remainers? Well, for the Leavers, they've abandoned any hope of mass deregulation, and that's always been the fear that Brexit will lead to the UK deregulating a lot of industries in the hope of getting more trade in place, and it's a race to the bottom, effectively. Any Leavers who had that kind of hope, that's been abandoned largely with this idea of managed divergence. But for the Remainers, they have accepted the UK will take back control of rules and regulations. There will not be total alignment with the EU in terms of rules and regulations. There will not be the UK accepting any EU rules and regulations from other institutions which aren't part of the UK government. And so it's a pretty much a middle ground, and it's been something which, to Prime Minister's credit, she's received a lot of praise for in these morning papers today, particularly the way she chaired the meeting and managed the disagreements amongst her cabinet members, all of whom are personally have very strong opinions on what Brexit should look like. What's going to happen now? Well, it's now pending the EU negotiations. So it's now Britain going to the EU saying this is our position, and the EU saying this is our position, and working out where the actual agreement is going to be for this final deal. The EU Prime Minister is due to give a speech next week, basically setting out to the world the UK's position in more clear terms. So that will be the big event of next week to look forward to. What's happening over in Brussels today? Quite an important day. The EU27 members of states will have an informal meeting. Now, the main point of this meeting has always been to discuss what's going to happen with this gaping Brexit-shaped budget black hole they've got. So the EU obviously gets budgets, gets contributions from all its member states, including the UK at the moment. The UK contributes about 12 billion euros to the EU, or more, roughly a year. That's obviously going to, not be in place in March 2019 when the UK leaves. So how are they going to fill that 12 billion euro black hole? Well, the European Commission is urging member states to not only maintain the current levels by increasing contributions of the 27, but also actually to then increase the EU budget. So effectively that means for member states coughing up more money to go into the EU institutions. Now, that hasn't gone down well with a number of countries, and indeed within the politics of other countries. They're not really prepared to give over more money to the EU because obviously domestic spending will have its own pressures as well. But consider this, President Macron, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, both very, very strong, particularly President Macron, very strong in reforming and improving the European Union, the European institutions. So it'll be very interesting today to see where the ball actually lands, as obviously France and Germany are the real power players in the EU and set the tone and really make the decisions for the rest of the nations to follow. So really interesting to see what's going to happen today there as well. They've got a press conference at around 5 p.m. where they will, of course, be responding to this whole news story from the UK about the managed divergence in the UK policy. So expect some lines on that from both Angela Merkel and President Macron, but also EU Commissioner Jean-Claude Juncker, possibly Michel Barnier as well. Finally, something a little bit more local in Westminster happening today. 3 former Prime Ministers have backed the Daily Mirror's campaign to rewrite organ donor laws. Now, this is a private member's bill today. It's coming through. It's from Labour MP Geoffrey Robinson. It's called the Organ Donation brackets deemed consent close bracket bill. It has its second reading in the Commons, and now this is significant because the government has said it supports the proposal, and it's a proposal to make organ donation an opt-out rather than an opt-in system. So rather than having to sign saying, yes, I want my organs to be donated, you will have to write saying, I actually want to withdraw my name from the list. I do not want my organs donated after my death. The Chancellor Philip Hammond, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn and Lib Dem leader Vince Cable are all those who've signed indicating they will attend today to make sure that this gets a good sitting and a good process in the House of Commons. So interesting to see what happens there as well. That's pretty much it for today, and indeed this week. You're up to date. Don't forget you can find all the latest on what we're doing here on Core Politics on our Facebook page and Twitter right here. We'll see you again at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. But from me and all the team at Core London, have a fantastic weekend ahead.